Okay, welcome back everyone. Today we're going to have a workshop on polynomial operations. Objective number one. I can determine linear and quadratic factors of a polynomial expression of degree 3 and of degree 4, including factoring the sum and difference of two cubes and factoring by grouping. Question number one. Which equation represents a complete factorization of 81a to the fourth minus 256? So as you can see by practice, you know that this is called the difference of squares, and this is a perfect square. Okay, and this is also a perfect square. So let's go ahead and start doing this by hand. So I have two parentheses. One has plus, one has minus. And then go ahead and take the square root of your first term. Okay, you're going to put those there. And then now get the square root of 256, which is 16. And then put those there. Okay, this side right here is already prime because that's a plus and cannot anymore be factored out. However, this side is still going to be perfect square and a minus. So we're going to go ahead and do the same thing on that side. Again, prepare two parentheses with one plus and one minus. Get the square root of your first term, which is 3a, and put those there. And then now get the square root of negative 16 or 16, which is 4, and put those there. Those now are your final factors. And so your answer is letter A, and we can use Desmos to check this. All right, so as you can see here, I had plugged in our equation, and that is the red one. And here I had plugged in choice answer letter A. And if I click on that, you're going to be able to see that your choice answer letter A is the same as your original equation. So the answer is A. All right, so number two, factor completely 125x to the third plus 8y to the sixth. And you know that this is a special product called sum of cubes. So let's go ahead and do this by hand. Make two parentheses, one short and one long. Follow the pattern plus minus plus because this is a plus, this has to be a plus. Get the cube root of 125x cubed, which is 5x. And this is the reason why we know that it is 5x. Now get the cube root of 8y to the 6, which is 2y squared. And this is the reason why it's 2y squared. Write it down here. Now square the first term and put it here. Now square the second term and put it here. Now multiply these two terms and put it here as a middle term. And so it matches choice letter B. Okay, so example number three, factor completely x cubed plus 2x squared minus 15x. So just a general rule, whenever you're factoring, just remember if you can do it with the greatest common factor, you will have to do that first. And so here, we're going to check for greatest common factor, and the greatest common factor for all the three terms is x. So we're going to factor this out with an x. So if you take out x from x cubed, it's just going to be x squared here. If you're going to take out x from 2x squared, it's just going to be 2x here. If you take out x from negative 15x, it will just be negative 15. And so now you have a quadratic here inside, which is easier done with trial and error. So I want you to think of the factors of negative 15 that when added will be a positive 2. So here is what I came up with because I thought of two numbers that when I multiply will be a negative 15. So definitely different signs. But the higher number will have to have a positive sign. So I'm kind of thinking positive 5 plus negative 3 is going to give me a positive 2. And positive 5 times negative 3 is going to give me a negative 15. So these are your numbers. We're going to do reverse FOIL. Let us go ahead and plug both of this in on Desmos just to check them. Okay, so this is your original graph, and this is your factored form. As you can see, it went on top of it, and so therefore, turn it on and off. So therefore, the answer is this that we have generated a while ago manually. Okay, example number four. Tracy is factoring this equation, which expression shows one of the factors of the equation. So let's go ahead and factor this out. And as you can see, the first step is the greatest common factor. And I can see that 2 is the greatest common factor here. If I take out 2 from here, it's going to turn out to be 2x squared. Factor out the 2 here, and it's going to turn to negative 9x. Factor this out with the 2, and this will turn to negative 35. I just want to set this aside so that this does not go in the way of us doing this by grouping. As you all know, factoring by grouping entails that you multiply the first coefficient with your constant. And then you're going to think of the factors of negative 70 that when added will turn to a negative 9. Okay, so that's too far from negative 9. This will turn to negative 3 when added. And notice I'm putting the negative on the higher number because that's what you want to happen. You want the negative 9. So you want to put it on the higher number. Okay, I guess I found it. It is negative 14 times 5. Negative 14 times 5 is negative 70, but negative 14 plus 5 is negative 9. So these are our factors. So we're now going to go to the next step, which is rewriting our expression. So rewrite the first term. Instead of negative 9x, we're going to do negative 14x and then here plus 5x. And then rewrite negative 35. Okay, now let's start grouping these two together and then this is another group. Okay, now let's perform greatest common factoring to both of them. Okay, so for this expression, the greatest common factor is 2x and 2x squared divided by 2x is x. And the negative 14x divided by 2x is negative 7. And then now for this expression, the greatest common factor is 5. Okay, so 5x divided by 5 is x. Okay, negative 35 divided by 5 is negative 7. All right, for this term and this term, there is a greatest common factor as well, which is x minus 7, and so you will have to take those two out. If you take out x minus 7 from here, you're left with 2x. And this side, if you divide x minus 7 by x minus 7, you're left with positive 5. Don't forget the 2 that you have set aside and put it here, and these are the factors. All right, so if we take a look at what we did here, the answer is letter D. All right, so let's now go ahead and answer number 5. The following expression is factored by grouping. In what step does an error appear? So I left this here because this is factoring by grouping so that you can kind of pattern what is factoring by grouping. So step 1 looks to me that it's right. Step 2, it is right. You factored out negative 1 on both sides here, and that's all you did. Step 3, you factored out 2x here on this side, and then here you factored out 5, negative 5 on both sides. And right here is the error, this squared, because we don't ever square this. This is what it's thinking that it's squaring. We are not squaring that. So the answer here is the error occurred in step 4, which is letter D. All right, so factor completely x to the 8 minus 1, and this is different of squares because those two are perfect squares. So let's go ahead and do that by hand. Make two parentheses with different size inside. Get the square root of the first term, which is x to the fourth. This is a summary of why it's x to the fourth, because x to the fourth times x to the fourth is x to the 8. So that is the square root of x to the 8. Now get the square root of 1 and put it here as well. Don't forget to put the x to the fourth here too. Okay, so here's a brief explanation on why the square root of 1 is 1, because 1 times 1 is 1. This is already a prime factor. However, here is another difference of squares, and so you can still factor this out. Again, prepare two parentheses and put plus and minus in them. Get the square root of x to the fourth, which is x squared. Put it on both sides. So here's a brief explanation on why that is so. And then now get the square root of 1 and put it here on both sides. This is already prime and cannot be factored out any further, but this can still be factored out. Prepare your two parentheses again with 1 plus and 1 minus and get the square root of x squared, which is x and x. Get the square root of 1, which is 1 and 1. So now this is the completely factored form of this expression. And the answer is A. Checking it with Desmos, plug in the original expression, then plug in choice A onto Desmos. And as you can see, it went on top of your original graph. So that confirms that your answer is A. All right, so objective number 2, I can add, subtract, and multiply polynomials. In example number 1, we are supposed to subtract this expression from this expression. So this is a parenthesis. So please note that there's a negative 1 there that we will have to distribute. This also has a positive 1 that you will distribute, but then you already know now that if you distribute a positive 1 to all of them, it's the same as just removing the parentheses. This, however, if you distribute a negative 1 to all of them, you would notice that the signs will all change. So let's do it. So here I had distributed the positive 1 to all these terms and it just came out as the same. Okay, however here, negative 1 times 1x squared will be negative 1x squared. All right, now, so negative 1 times positive 2x is going to be negative 2x. And so right here, negative 1 times negative 1 will be a positive 1. Then you will combine like terms. Those two are like terms and will be 2x squared. These two are like terms and will be negative 7x. These two are like terms, and so that's going to be a positive 9. Notice my coding, guys. Like terms have the same lines that I'm putting. So this 3 lines go with these 3 lines, and that's a positive 9. So my answer is letter D, and you can check this on Desmos. Graph your original expression and graph your correct answer choice. And it went on top. So the answer is letter D. All right, question number 2, simplify. We're going to multiply this, and what I'm going to do is to just get this term and distribute it to all the 3 terms, and then get this other term and distribute it to all the other 3 terms. So that's 5x to the fourth. That is negative 15x to the third. That's negative 20x, and so I'm done with my 5x, and now I'm going to distribute my negative 2. And that will be negative 2x to the third, and that will be positive 6x squared. And that will be positive 8. And then now we're going to combine like terms. Copy this down because this is by itself. Negative 15x to the minus 2x cubed is going to be negative 17x cubed. And as you can see, there are no more like terms. So just bring this down and then bring this down so that it will be in order. And then this will be your last term. And so now this is your final answer. And let's go ahead and plug it in on Desmos. All right, so this is your original expression, and that is our graph. And then now this one is our answer, and when you turn it on, it's going to show that it went on top. So that is the right answer. Objective number 3, I can solve equations involving rational exponents or radical expressions. Question number 1, what's the value of t that makes the equation true? Whenever you're solving for any variable, your goal is to isolate that variable. And this is how we will do it. Put the negative 1 onto the other side, making it become positive 1. Bring this down. And what you want to happen to the exponent is that you want this to turn into 1. This will only turn into 1 if I raise this whole thing to the power of 4/3, the inverse of 3/4. And whatever you do on this side, you also do on that side. This 2 will now cancel out and turn into a 1, so this will just be 27t. This will now be 27 raised to the 4/3, which will actually be ending up being the exponent, and the 3 is your cube root or the index, like this. The cube root of 27 is 3. So this right here is a brief explanation on why the cube root of 27 is 3, because 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. So the cube root of 27 is 3. And so now we're going to, after getting the cube root, we're now going to raise it to the power of 4 and solve for t. 3 to the fourth power is 81. Bring down 27t and divide both sides by 27. So t is 3 and the answer is C. Okay, now using Desmos, we want this to be equal to 26. So if I plug in here 3, it should equal to 26. Okay, put parentheses, replace the x with a 3, and the answer is 26. Okay, example number 2, let us solve for x, and then this negative 2 right here will have to turn to a positive 1. It will now cancel out and turn to a positive 1. So just bring this down, and now this will be raised to a negative 1/2. That negative 1/2 will be applied to both the power of 1 and the 4. Okay, you need to flip them so that the powers will turn to positive, and that's the same as getting the square root. Square root of 4 is 2, square root of 1 is 1. Put the negative 3 to the other side. And the answer is 1. So you can see this left expression should be equal to 1/4. So plug in x 1. If you plug in 1 in place of x, it's going to give you 1/4, which is 0.25. Plug this in on Desmos and the left side should equal to 25. Okay, so the correct answer is letter D.